The early morning light over Rome washed the city in a soft gold as the world remained unaware that one of Korea's most beloved stars was quietly beginning a new chapter far from home. Along a narrow stone street in the district of Prati, where pastel-colored buildings stand shoulder to shoulder and the hum of espresso machines echoes from every corner cafe, Joong-ki walked at an unhurried pace. A simple cap, a long wool coat, and a scarf wrapped loosely around his neck, nothing like the carefully styled figure that once dominated advertisements and press photos across Asia. Here, he was not Halley's golden boy. He was simply a man trying to reclaim his breath. The scent of roasted coffee drifted toward him as he passed a familiar cafe where he often studied Italian. The barista, who now recognized him only as Giovanni, nodded warmly, unaware of the storm his customer had left behind in Korea. The quietness of the moment contrasted sharply with the chaos he had lived through in the year following his very public divorce. Memories returned not as dramatic flashes, but as dull aches, crowded press conferences, surging headlines, the weight of expectations, and the loneliness that followed him like a shadow. The world had opinions about him, theories about him, accusations toward him, yet not a single person had asked how he felt. Rome had not been part of any master plan. It was an escape born from exhaustion. After filming, after smiling through interviews that trained him, after appearing strong for the sake of professionalism, he found himself unable to breathe in soul. Too many whispers, too many eyes, too many memories. He boarded a plane to Italy with only a suitcase and a mind full of unanswered questions. What now? Who am I without the noise? How do I begin again? The apartment he rented in Rome was modest compared to the penthouses Korean stars often favored. A classic building with iron balconies draped in plants, marble floors that cooled his feet in the summer, and tall windows that bathed the rooms in golden European sunlight. At first, the silence unnerved him. It was too calm, steady, too unlike the constant rush of Seoul. But slowly, the quiet became comforting. He woke to birds instead of a camera's shutters. He walked streets where no one asked for a photo. He sat alone in cafes without hearing his name whispered from the next table. It was in those early months that the aftermath of the divorce truly settled in. The emotional weight he had carried while working non-stop began to surface. Nights were often long, filled with restless thoughts and memories. The emptiness after years of love, marriage, public attention, and separation was not something he could shake easily. He felt guilt at times, angered others, but mostly a deep fatigue, a desire to disappear, just for a little while. Yet even in the loneliness, there was something healing about Rome. The slowness of life, the warm greetings from strangers, the rhythm of the city that seemed to say, take your time. There were days he would sit by the Tiber River, watching the water flow beneath the ancient bridges, trying to understand where his own life was heading. Sometimes he scribbled thoughts into a small notebook, fragments of dreams, lines of potential scripts, reflections about the man he was becoming. Rome became his refuge, a city that didn't demand anything from him. One evening, as he wandered along the cobblestones near Piazza del Popolo, he met someone who would later change everything. Katie Louise Saunders, elegant yet gentle, familiar yet distant. Someone who understood him in ways that felt strangely natural. Their connection was not dramatic, not the fiery spark of romance scripted in films. Instead, it was quiet, a conversation that flowed without effort, a shared silence that didn't feel awkward. For he didn't realize he needed. Katie had once been an actress herself, navigating red carpets and interviews, giving pieces of her life to cameras just as he had. She recognized the tiredness in his eyes because she had once seen it in her own reflection. She knew how fame could suffocate, public misunderstanding could crush a heart, how starting over could feel like drowning. And so, instead of asking about his career or his divorce, questions he was tired of answering, she simply asked you if he was eating well, sleeping enough, finding joy in small things. First time in months, someone saw him not as a scandal, but as a person. Their days unfolded slowly. Katie taught him Italian phrases that went beyond the basics, the kind locals used. She showed him her favorite bookstores, her favorite bakery in Trastevere, the park where she liked to sit when life felt overwhelming. Together they walked through Rome like two people rediscovering the world. She helped him integrate into the culture, laugh again, and breathe without fear. And he, in return, felt gratitude, deep, grounding gratitude. Seasons changed, so did he. Rome's gentle mornings softened his edges. Its art, food, and stories taught him that life wasn't meant to be lived in constant scrutiny. He found himself interested in new film styles, new acting approaches, new ways to tell stories that felt more mature, more grounded. The city awakened something inside him. And he thought he had lost, the desire to grow not as a celebrity, but as a human being. There were moments when the past haunted him, nightmares of headlines, flashes of moments he wished had gone differently. Each time, Katie was there. Not to replace anyone. Not to erase anything. Remind him that his life did not end with a marriage, nor with a divorce, nor with public misunderstanding. Reminded him that he still had dreams worth chasing, feelings worth exploring, stories worth telling. On one particularly quiet afternoon, with sunlight stretching across their small living room, he opened a script on his laptop. Katie placed a warm cup of cappuccino beside him, gently brushing his shoulder. "You're doing well," she said, smiling softly. In that moment, he realized he had finally found a place where his heart could rest. Far from the flashing cameras of Seoul. Far from the voices of the past. Far from everything that once hurt him, Joong-ki was beginning again. And though he didn't know exactly where this new road would lead, he felt, for the first time in a long while, that he wasn't walking it alone. As the Roman sun dipped behind the terracotta rooftops, casting long shadows across the quiet streets, Joong-ki found himself settling into a life that felt both unfamiliar and strangely comforting. Gone were the days of frantic schedules, airport flashlights, and a dozen cameras waiting outside his apartment. Here in Rome, work came to him in gentle waves. Pressure softer, the expectations more human. Yet, despite the peace surrounding him, a spark began to reignite, one that had been dormant since before the divorce. He started reading scripts again. Not because he needed to escape, but because he wanted to create. Explored European acting techniques. Studied films in small indie theaters. Allowed himself to be influenced by new artistry he had never had time to appreciate in Korea. Slowly, the creative hunger returned, not as a desperate chase for success, but as a sincere desire to challenge himself. It was during this period that the offer for Reborn Rich arrived. He was far from Seoul. Producers and directors had not forgotten his ability to bring complexity and vulnerability to a character. Sitting at his dining table beneath soft Roman light, he read through the first episode, page after page evoking a thrill he hadn't felt in years. Katie noticed the shift instantly, the way his eyes brightened, the way he unconsciously tapped his fingers when he liked a script. "You should do it," she said one evening, gently placing her hand over his. "Story is your return." With her encouragement, he accepted the role. And just like that, his life resumed a delicate balance between Rome and Seoul. He flew back and forth, sometimes spending weeks on set before quietly returning to Italy, where no one asked invasive questions. No one judged his past, and no one cared about old gossip. Katie welcomed him home each time with a warm embrace and a simple dinner waiting on the table, a grounding reminder of the life he was building. Their relationship deepened naturally, without drama, without force. Shared long walks along the Tiber River, where he would talk about the pressures of the Korean film industry, and she would listen with a patience that soothed every wound he carried. She offered advice when he needed it, silence when he didn't, and support in every form imaginable. When he proposed to her, it wasn't with grand gestures or flashing lights, but in the quietness of their balcony overlooking Rome. He told her that she had helped him believe in life again, that she had become the steady ground beneath his unsteady feet. She smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. He whispered, "Yes," sealing a future that neither of them had dared to imagine when they first met. Their marriage announcement stunned Korea. Some fans rejoiced, others questioned, and as always, the internet buzzed with speculation. But Joong-ki stood firm, choosing to protect his wife from the noise. He released a rare, heartfelt message to the public, not as an actor defending a position, a man safeguarding his family. It was a turning point. For the first time, he chose personal happiness publicly, unapologetically. And then, the greatest shift of all came with the birth of their son. He held the baby in a quiet hospital room in Rome, the world outside unaware of the tender moment unfolding. The weight of the tiny body in his arms, the warmth, breaths, Everything felt like a second chance at life. Had played fathers in dramas, filmed scenes of family reunions, delivered lines about love and loss. But nothing prepared him for the overwhelming surge of emotion he felt looking down at the child who carried both his past and his future. Fatherhood changed him. No longer thought only of roles and scripts. He thought of stability, safety, love. He wanted to be present, not just physically, emotionally. On slow mornings, he pushed the stroller through Villa Borghese, a cap low on his head while Katie walked beside him, their son sleeping peacefully. The simplicity of it all, the laughter, the shared glances, the quiet moments, felt like the most precious luxury in his life. But life abroad, even in the beauty of Italy, not without its challenges. There were nights when he missed Seoul, the food, his family, the friends who had supported him since his rookie days. Language barriers created awkward misunderstandings. A child without grandparents nearby was exhausting. Anti-fans online continued to troll, accusations crossing borders. And as his fame resurged due to Reborn Rich and later international projects, paparazzi in Italy began to take notice, trailing him through alleyways and cafes. Still, through every difficulty, Katie remained a steadfast presence. She reassured him when stress mounted. She encouraged him when he doubted his career choices. Reminded him that the life they were building didn't have to be perfect, it just had to be theirs. They formed little rituals, home-cooked dinners, night conversations in a mix of Korean, English, and Italian. Weekend trips to the countryside when he needed to reset. In the chaos of balancing two worlds, she became his anchor. As months passed, Joong-ki found something he hadn't felt since his early 20s, maturity grounded in peace. Rome taught him patience. Marriage taught him vulnerability. Fatherhood taught him depth. And all of it reshaped him not as a star, but as a person. He eventually returned to Korea for longer stays to discuss future projects. The atmosphere was different. Fans greeted him warmly. The media approached him with renewed respect. And directors saw in him not just a leading man, but a genuinely evolved artist. He was no longer the young actor defined by romantic roles or public controversies. He had become a man with a story of resilience, healing, and transformation. On a quiet evening back in Rome, Katie hummed softly in the kitchen and their son played with wooden blocks on the floor. Joong-ki stepped out onto the balcony. The city glowed beneath the moonlight, each building rich with history and life. He closed his eyes, letting the cool breeze wash over him, and felt an overwhelming gratitude for the journey that had led him here, through heartbreak, through reinvention, through love, far from the noise of his past. In this foreign city that had become his sanctuary, Joong-ki rebuilt not only his career, but every part of his life that had once fallen apart. And in the warmth of his small Roman home, surrounded by the family he had always hoped for, he understood. Life doesn't begin again when the world forgives you. It begins again when you forgive yourself.